Season 4 of Abbott Elementary is in full swing. Welcome to 4AZ. I'm your host, Tyler McDowell Blanken. In case you missed it, we're dropping new episodes every other Wednesday to discuss this new season's storylines. On this edition, I welcome Sarah Beth, a third grade teacher in Marana Unified School District, to recap episodes 1 and 2. We discuss Janine and Gregory's decision to make their relationship public and the real-life perils of dating as a teacher. Also, Sarah reacts to the Ringworm dilemma and so much more. You can follow her at Dear Sarah Beth on Instagram. Do you have an Abbott fan in your life? Are you that fan? I'd love to welcome fellow Abbott viewers for our recap episodes. Reach out to us at 4AZTeach across the social spaces or via 4azteach.org and we'll make it happen. Please rate and subscribe on YouTube or the audio platform of your choice. We'd love to hear your thoughts, reactions, predictions, everything. Here's my conversation with Sarah. We're here with Sarah Beth. Sarah, welcome to 4AZ. I'm so excited you're here. How are you? How's your semester?
I am good. So we just wrapped up fall break. It was a good start to the semester. Definitely, it's getting a little different. These guys are the post-COVID babies in third grade. And so while they didn't have to deal with the shutdown effects and things like that, it definitely had a huge effect on their social emotional. So we're working through a lot of those pieces, which has been a very interesting challenge for me. It's teaching academics to kindergartners, and I love our kinder kids. I don't teach kinder for many reasons. And so I've learned a lot of patience this quarter, but it's going really good.
It's a must. Yeah, it's a must. I think really at any level of teaching K through 12,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have the patience of a saint. And if you don't, you either got to work on it or you got to consider another career.
You learn it real quick on the job because I was not a patient person coming into education.
Oh, wow.
I still don't have a ton of patience for adults because in my head it's you should know better. And then I went and
adult patience for adults, optional. Patience for kids.
They're learning. I even tell my kids all the time, I'm you guys are learning how to be humans. We don't think about all the things, right? As functioning adults that we know how to do that someone had to teach us at some point. And it's such an insane, I even just think about my mom had to teach me how to hold a spoon and God bless her because I don't have children. Those pieces are what scare me the most about having kids is how do you teach them to hold a spoon? You should just you just know how to do it.
Yeah. There's a proper way to do these things.
Yeah.
Well, I want to rewind all the way back. So you are an amazing third grade teacher at the wonderful Marana Unified School District.
Yep.
How did your journey into education begin? Did you know you always wanted to be a teacher?
I did not always want to be a teacher. So it started a little in first grade. I swore I would never be a teacher. A girl in my class, we did not always get along, and that was what she was always going to be. And I always saw it as kind of the suck up answer of oh, you're just trying to get on the teacher's good side. And so in first grade, I was never going to be a teacher. But I always knew I wanted to work with kids. That was never the question. And so my junior year of high school out at Mountain View in the Marana district, they offer the child development classes. And so for that, your first semester, you're learning about child development. The first year you do, it's birth to 3. And then the second year, it's 3 to 6. And then your second semester of that year, you run a preschool. And parents bring their kids into Mountain View. The program's really accelerated. It's really cool to see how far it's come. And so we taught preschool kids for 3 days a week or something like that. And I fell in love with it. And I was oh no, I want to be a teacher. Going through college, I'd always kind of look at I looked into social work, things like that. I've always known I wanted to do something not just with kids, but giving back. That's always been the community. And then I just fell in love with teaching, and it hit a point where I was there's no other option. I can never see myself doing something else.
No kidding.
And so going from first grade me, who was never going to do it, and it's I can't see myself doing anything else.
Wow. What? Probably a silly question, but I'll ask it. What is it about teaching? You had this idea of what it was going to be based on your experience at Mountain View. And what I'm hearing from you is that teaching maybe even exceeded your highest expectations of what it could be as a career.
Yeah, it really did. I think a lot of it is the relationships. It's the relationships you're building with the kids in your class, the families. I've been teaching out at my school now for 10 years.
A
And
decade, a
so
full decade, Sarah.
I know my first,
Congratulations.
thank
Get
you.
that
I know
pin.
I got my 10-year pen this year.
Get that pin from Dan Streeter.
My first group of kids, they're seniors this year. They're getting ready to graduate. And so it's being able to see those pieces, the advocacy piece of it. I also have my degree in special education, and my master's is in behavior. And so that's a really big passion of mine. I really love learning about behavior, why we do the things we do, how we learn to do the appropriate things, because kids who have behavior, it's communication. They are either trying to tell us something or they just haven't learned correctly, right? And we live in this world where social media is so easily accessible for them. So they're learning all these things online. Family structures teach different things, especially depending on culture, that can affect how they're taught, what they're taught is socially acceptable at home. And then they're coming here to school and trying to figure out all these pieces. And so I think that's really where the love fell in, was the behavior aspect and the relationship aspect. Right before I graduated college, I got hired actually at the school I work at as an aide. And I worked with the resource program, so the push-in disabilities program, mainly with students with behavioral problems. And I went in not knowing when I was hired, I was just told you'll be leading small groups. That's all I knew. And going in, and I go in to meet with the special ed teacher I'm going to be working with. And she's like, all right, so let's talk about these kids. And again, I had no clue what I had signed up for. And she's like, so yeah, one, he elopes. He's thrown things. And I'm like, what? What have I, yeah, loved it. Best year of my life.
No kidding.
We had very little issue. We had days where he'd get mad and storm off and then stand outside or whatever. But it was just this year of getting to build those relationships with these kids who, because of their behaviors, they push so many people away, and getting to see that it was they just needed someone on their side. And so that's been a big piece for me too, is just that advocacy aspect of education. I love it.
Wow. And now all these years later, you said having your first group or cohort of kiddos who are now graduating from high school.
Yep, I get emails.
From Mountain View, right?
Marana. They're graduating
from Marana.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, it's been cool. Wow. I get emails all the time, and I've always told them I will be at graduation, and so they're emailing me, "Are you going to be there?" And I'm like, "What did I tell you?"
Gosh. They're getting you ready. It's not till May, but I got to make sure
they're ready. Yeah,
I got to make sure she's there.
Exactly. And it's just such a cool getting to see them become. I keep in touch with a lot of my former teachers. And so it's cool. I always tell my former teachers, what you taught me is what I instill. Your legacy lives on through me to my students. And it's such a cool to have that opportunity.
Wow. I got chills. I got chills hearing that. And it's not just because Arizona is finally cooling down.
I know, right?
That is, that's what this is about. Okay, so my final question before we get into Abbott talk for you, Sarah. So with all that in mind, what keeps you in the classroom? It sounds like relationships are at the top of that list. We know that educators are not without challenges, facing challenges year in and year out, particularly in our amazing home state of Arizona.
Yeah, it's not the money that's keeping me in the classroom. That's
I think you and I have been in the business, if you will, long enough where we've seen people's journeys who maybe branch off to higher education or go into realty or go into X number of directions. What keeps you grounded, and not just grounded in your work, but still loving what you do every single day? Is it all about the relationships, and that's where it starts and stops?
That's where it starts for sure. And I think it plays the biggest role, and not even just the relationships within my classroom. I'm a big member of MEA, so I have lots of relationships with teachers across the district. I am the negotiations lead there. So there's this huge advocacy piece. Advocacy is such a piece of my heart. The representation, making sure that all our groups are represented matters, both in the classroom, in the district. And it's just, I think one of the best things about teaching, besides the relationships, is that it's always something new. This, right? You taught high school, you'd look around and sometimes you're like, I wish there was like another adult in the room with me because I can't believe like this was just said. And like when we get into Abbott, we know. There's always a story to tell. There's always something going on. There's something ridiculous happening. There's, and it's the wins too. Watching your kids grow 5 reading levels when they could barely like sound out words or pieces like that too. It's just, there's so many pieces that keep me in the classroom that I just couldn't see myself doing something else.
And as you pointed out earlier, the social aspect. On one hand, it's obviously about the academics. That's why we show up every day. But I would imagine in your case, watching students grow socially, whether it's how to properly hold a spoon or how to interact with a peer who maybe has a completely different upbringing than you, that those are the wins that we want to celebrate, along with the test scores and of course reading comprehension and all those important factors.
All the pieces that you get to celebrate is such like a cool moment.
Wow.
When you watch like kids learn to advocate, like I'm a big on teaching kids to advocate for themselves and
talk about it. Self-advocacy. How do you teach that to youngsters?
A lot of it is why you have to first start by like getting them to self-reflect. The big conversation I always have in my classroom is like, I don't know what you don't know. So I don't know when you need help if you don't tell me. And then it's also modeling it, showing them like how you advocate for yourself or how you help them advocate. A lot of it is just talking about it and modeling it and showing it, which, is good teaching. That's what we do every day.
Makes sense. Yeah. So. Wow. Well, speaking of celebration, speaking of consistent, passionate adults in education, Sarah, we got to talk about Abbott. We're going to discuss, already. Yeah, so good already. I have my notes here. Maybe I'll follow them. Maybe I won't. We'll see what happens. But specifically, season 4 has arrived. Episodes 1 and 2 have been released, and we have to discuss everything we've seen. So I want to start with. Okay, I do. Listen, you are a true Abbott fan. I can't wait to get into this conversation.
I can't either. This is what most of our conversations are about.
Facts. This is true. Episode 1, entitled Back to School. I believe this is actually written by Quinta Brunson. Okay, so there's so much here we got to go over.
So many pieces.
There's so many pieces. So I'll start with the plot description for this first episode of the new season. It's as follows. When construction of a nearby golf course causes issues and brings unprecedented new arrivals to the school, the teachers of Abbott rally together to find out what they can do to improve the conditions they have been put in. Ava invites a human resources employee to the school when it becomes apparent that Janine and Gregory have been dating over the summer. We will talk about this. However, Janine becomes resistant in telling everyone when they are put on the spot. And then finally, Sarah, unbeknownst to them, everyone at the school, including students, already know that they're an item. It's just a matter of whether they want to make it officially public. So we can go sort of scene by scene. We can get kind of an overall glimpse of this, but I know this season is highly anticipated for you, for myself, and the nearly 2 million people who watch this amazing show every week. What were your thoughts on the season premiere?
I loved it. One, I just loved like there was so much going on within this episode, right? Like we're starting with the golf course and the checking in of the new student.
We got to talk about it. Yes.
Ava was like killing me with that because
Charlie, I think, right?
We just all had that feeling too, where like you walk in and you're like, oh, you're a new student. Like, where did you come from? And the parents like, we signed him up online. But then on top of it, like the diversity of the first white kid in the school.
I didn't even realize there were no white students in Abbott, which probably sounds ridiculous to some of our listeners. But I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And Charlie is the first.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to like the beauty of the writing, right? Like that's an everyday thing for them. So we're seeing it as an everyday, they probably don't even think about like, that's what their classroom dynamic looks like until it's changed. And like, I think it shows like that beauty because I didn't pick up on it. Like when I saw Charlie, I was like, oh, duh. But like, it never occurred to me that, especially because the adult cast is so diversified,
right?
That you don't see it, but it was like, oh yeah.
We'll talk about your love for Melissa Chimenti as well. I know
she is my favorite. This episode, she was absolutely my favorite with the pro-union stuff, and I was like, it's my girl.
Your pick is unchanged.
It will never change.
Nice.
But like just that like shock, and then trying to like figure out where they're like, are you at there? And even the parents kind of being like, everyone told us private, but we said yay public. And it's,
Yes.
especially like my school being so rural, we get a lot of families that are coming back from charter schools. And so it's that kind of like feeling of like they realize that like you realize like public schools tend to get a bad rap, especially here in Arizona, because we do have a legislature that would love to privatize education at the cost of our low income families. But it was like, it's just seeing that where they were like, you're still unsure, like even as parents, like, am I making the right decision at the end of the day? But man, watching Ava like run down those hallways, like getting everyone from the staff lounge, there's a ghost. Like
I've had
so
people
ridiculous, and it makes me love her. Like
I've
she's
had people in
insane.
my life ask if Ava is in any way an accurate representation of
Mhm.
administration, and there are maybe aspects of Ava's personality that
Yes.
I've seen in administrators, but overall, it's totally a comedic
Yes.
approach
Mhm.
to
Oh,
a principal.
absolutely.
Like I've never like some of what she does. I've never seen. I've also been blessed that I've had
Mhm.
pretty solid to great
Mhm.
administrations. I know that makes a huge
Yeah,
difference on the
it does.
experience of a
I'm in
teacher.
the same boat.
Ava, whether realistic or not, hilarious and is really a glue
Hilarious.
of the show. I think her and Mr. Johnson in many ways
That was what I was gonna
serve
say,
as the
Mr.
glues of the
Johnson.
show.
I
Yeah.
was like,
Mr. Johnson is the glue, but Ava's close
especially
second.
Mr. Johnson in the second episode.
Yes, we'll
Because he
talk
had some
about
great
this.
one-liners there. But yeah, like
Robert
they're
F.
just
Kennedy Jr.
comedic, and really
Yeah.
everyone's comedic timing within
Yes.
is
Yes.
so, and it plays like they're different types of comedy styles too.
They are very different, each of
Yeah.
them. Absolutely. What do you think of so you mentioned it
Mhm.
perfectly, the golf course. That was introduced to us early on here, episode 1, season 4. And later on, I think it's the top lawyer for
Mhm.
the this
Yep.
new golf facility. He comes to the the front office, and which
That
is
was
like
probably
the
my favorite scene.
I think
Well,
it's
that
Miles
one,
Nathaniel. Is that his
something
name?
like that. Miles something. Yep.
Yeah, you cannot be a lawyer with that name and not have nefarious
Oh
intentions.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
concerned about what this is gonna mean. What
Oh,
are your thoughts on the golf course?
I
I
felt
take it
about
as
him
it's gonna
like I
come
did.
back.
I think it was season 2 was the charter school season. I felt about him like I did when like the chart like where it was like,
Yes.
but also it's so true to like, I mean, like the gentrification, like we can tell like that's the avenue this is taking, the gentrification storyline. But like unfortunately, that's also so reflective of what's going on. Like, I mean, he spelled it out perfectly. You can be with us and get things, or you can be against us. We're still gonna build the golf course. So it's one of those things where I was like, oh, like, could I feel my stomach drop? But also then like watching as Shaminti is like bargaining with him
Laptops and
and laptops, and Jacob's trying to really hard. And it's hard. It's like it comes down to compromise, Like Jacob still wants to be that like moral compass of like, no, we're not taking anything. And then it's like you don't really have unfortunately, they don't have a choice as
Mhm,
much as like we hate it. And I'm interested to see how it plays out this season.
mhm. Isn't
Um,
that isn't
but
that reflective of everyday life as a
oh
teacher?
yeah.
Sometimes you have to operate I'm not saying, Sarah, that you accept
Oh
bribes
yeah.
in MUSD.
I'm
I'm
not
not
saying I'm
saying that.
against no.
Uh, I'm not saying that. Please don't quote that anymore. But what I am saying is on the day to day, given semester, given year, ultimately our job is to act in the
Yeah.
best interest of students. And sometimes, well, in the case of Ab, in the case of
Yeah.
Shementi,
Mhm.
accepting a bribe for laptops for kids, but I think that's reflective of every day.
Yeah.
We just try to do what's best for students, and we want
Exactly.
them, particularly as public school
Mhm.
educators, we want them to have everything, to have unlimited resources.
Exactly, and especially, I know you were out at Marana and, like, coming from Roadrunner, we're a Title I school, like, sometimes you just don't have a choice that you have to make the best decision with the options you have. If you don't have resources, and again, like you said, like, the golf course is going to be built whether they like it or not.
Right.
Like, as hard as that is to, like, accept, if you can't change, like, life is full of compromise is really where I'm trying to go with this. Like, you just have to, and there's a difference between, like, compromising your morals versus compromising, like, the benefits. And, as much as, like, I hate it and I hate within that story, it's gonna be a great storyline for the season.
It's
It's
coming
gonna
back.
tell a great
I'm worried.
story.
I'm
Oh,
worried
yeah.
those the acceptance of the
Mhm.
bribe or bribes, I'm worried that's going to come
Yeah.
back later in the
Something's
season.
going to come
Same?
back because it has kind of like established this, and and again, it plays into like oppressive roles, right? Like the golf course is the oppressor. Like you don't have a choice, get in line or don't. We don't really like, they don't care, you know.
Mhm.
But if you can find ways, like, I'm very pro union. I'm, part of the Arizona Education Association and our
Marana
MEA.
Education Association,
Yep.
right? You referenced that?
I am. And so like when Shimenti was like, well, we rat you out because you hired non-union workers. And, when she said they hired scabs, I'm like, tears. I'm like, yeah, get them. I was like, get them, Shimenti. And for him to turn around, like, and, and even that showed the change where he's like, well, which I did love his little line where he's like, they'll start on Monday. We'd have them start Saturday, but, unions.
Hilarious.
And so like,
Writing.
even then she did like, you can't change the overall, but there was that one piece of impact, right? You're not hiring union workers. Now you don't have a choice.
Exactly.
And with how that one's kind of written, it sounds like they were supposed to hire union workers from the get-go and didn't. Right. But there are these ways where, we can't change everything, but you can still impact. And so again, I'm team Shimenti all the way. Like,
I know you are.
I tell my friends, I'm like, listen, if you want to know what I'm like in the classroom, I know you guys want to picture me as like Janine, and I love Janine. I'm Shimenti. There's at this point.
Really?
Like,
You've had this conversation?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Wow.
I'm like, you guys know Shimenti? It's me. Like, I don't know what else.
You want me to be Janine, but I'm a
I have my Janine moments. I have my Barbara moments at this point, 10 years in. But throughout the day, I'm Shimenti. There's no question.
Yeah, shout out to Miss Howard. Well, clearly West Philly appears to be getting a golf course, whether we like it or not.
Exactly.
To be continued there. My final question for you about episode 1. I don't want to bury the lead. Janine and Gregory. They hit us with the pump fake, Sarah, that I really fell for at the beginning of this episode, going a little bit out of order. When Janine says, we tried it out, Greg and I, but we decided we're just going to be friends. And then if memory serves, Greg enters the scene and both of them say, no, we're just kidding. We're together. We're happy as ever. It's like, y'all don't play with me like that.
I think only for me, the reason I didn't fall for it is like, we're 4 seasons up to this being the storyline that I was like, there's no way that they would just end it like and not show something. Like, there's no way, given how well season 3 ended.
Yes, like, the best episode of Abbott, in my opinion. Yeah. Best episode of the entire series.
Oh yeah, it was so good. Oh, that little type A Janine with her party spots. Like,
hilarious. It was so well executed. Okay,
Yeah.
so you are absolutely right. Janine and Gregory, they are an item. They seem happy as ever. What are your thoughts on this storyline? Because as you said, Sarah, it really is the basis for all things Abbott. It's been the thread from season 1 all the way through the end of season 3. We've waited for it. We thought we were going to get it at various moments, but now it's here. Kind of translating that into everyday life. This feels so accurate to me because I'm thinking of my experience in the classroom, particularly during my 20s, and it can be so hard to find partners or potential partners when you're in a job that can be so all-consuming.
Yeah.
I know particularly in my early years, being a teacher was the most important part of my identity. I took it so seriously, at the risk of spending time with friends or maybe going out and meeting people. So my thought process is, Sarah, if you're not dating someone who's on your staff, like a peer you meet at your school, like, who are you dating? Because how do you have time to meet anybody?
Which is so true. It's funny,
what
though,
do you make of this?
Very much the difference.
It can be dangerous, though. It can be dangerous. We saw HR get involved. You and I have seen you and I have seen people in the district date each other, people at the same school site date each other.
And
then when they inevitably break up, usually one or both parties don't return to that school the next year. So not just Janine and Greg, we know we're happy for them. We want them together forever. How do you think this translates into kind of the everyday life of a teacher?
So well, where like dating is just hard. It's funny because this is the difference between, me being more elementary and you being more high school, because high school, you guys definitely have a more diverse staff typically, to where elementary,
larger staff too.
There are not as many male teachers on an elementary campus.
How many male teachers are on your campus? A handful? At most?
Let's see. I
didn't have any male teachers during my K through 6.
Yeah. We've got like 4 or 5 maybe of our 30 staff. Like, it's a very small It's a small,
I'm sure the age ranges differ as
age
well.
ranges, they're all married. So none of them are an option
Yeah,
anyways. And so,
that's it. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like, and that's our like running joke is like, we're not meeting anyone. And then we're so rural on top of it. So for us, it's like, I just don't have time. Like,
how do you meet
it is
someone
so
when you're a
hard. Like I've
teacher?
tried like dating apps and stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's like my schedule is so tight on top
Right.
of all that I do for where I'm like, do you want to come to a board meeting with me? Like,
Right. And I
I'm
found that if
canvassing for
people
the election this week, like it
period.
becomes like you have to be able to fit into my life. And like luckily
Right.
I have a great family support system. I've got great friends, things like that, that I'm very content with where I am in life because I believe we end up where we're supposed to be and it all works out the way it's supposed to. But it does like make it hard, especially like when I'm talking to friends and they're like, well, what about someone on campus? And I'm like, first of all, I work with a campus of about 30 people. And like, I would be very much like, I don't need people in my business like that, which is funny because I'm pretty like outgoing and extroverted and like, I'm not a big secret keeper. So I'm like, I don't need people speculating about what I'm doing. And like, that was one of the best parts of the storyline. I loved when the two kids came up about the podcast.
Yes.
One, I love the jab.
Hard-hitting interview.
We're convinced Mr. C can't read. That was so funny.
Right.
But then they're like, are they dating? And like, especially like for small campuses, that is so true. Like everybody knows everybody's business.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there are no secrets. And like, it's funny too, because kids pick up on so much too. Like we think
they see everything.
They pick up on like little things that you say and they'll like ask me and I'm like, what?
Yeah. The Abbott kid's been knowing about Greg.
Oh yeah. Everybody knew. And I think that
everybody.
was just like one of the best storylines is they thought they were so sly. And every single person was like, no. And then when they're in the library.
When they're in the library.
And the keychain.
Staff meetings are always in the library, yes.
And they are. Well, and it was funny because I had flashbacks to our PvP days when they're like, you got to present your goal.
Oh gosh.
And so I'm thinking like how we had to write the smart goals. And then like Barbara gets up there and is talking about testing the milk and the glue because the boogers are too much.
Yeah. Do you remember the frozen chicken nugget? I think this was later in episode 1, maybe episode 2.
Yeah, that's episode 1 because they cut the gas.
Because the gas. Like, oh no, this poor kid chipping his tooth on.
He takes it out. Mr. C's like, that's a lot of ketchup.
Yeah.
Right? Again, so I don't know about like at the high school level, but we do get a lot of like body parts. Like,
oh no, yeah. It applies to older kiddos as well.
It's definitely weird.
And what you said is so profound, Sarah, in that I found in past relationships, some partners, and this is not, I'm perfect and it was all on them. This is not that at all. Sometimes I found it hard to fully communicate the job of being a teacher. And like you said, particularly someone like you, Sarah, who is hyper involved in your community and in the district and doing everything and more for kiddos. Sometimes like on a Friday, hey, you want to go out or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yo, listen, on a Friday, we get out of school early. Okay, I want to get my Chipotle. And then I'm just in for the night. Like by 8:30, it's a wrap for me.
Yeah, it is so hard to explain to people who aren't in education. Like, we are constantly making decisions, like from when the bell rings to when
thousands a day.
Thousands. Right? Like, I don't even realize half the time, like how many decisions. And then, dealing with, I know like at the high school, right? You guys are switching classes, but like these different groups of peoples and constantly overstimulated. Like, let's be honest, that like by the time the day is done, I'm done. Like my brain is fried and it's so hard. And then,
it's such a unique job.
Title I populations, right? On top of that, like I go home and, I still worry, are my kids eating? And even if they're not Title I, you still worry.
It's hard to turn it off.
Are they eating? Are they going home? Like I worry about like what they're being exposed to on social media, things like that. Like it's just a constant. And it's so hard because when I talk to my friends that aren't in education, they're like, oh, you just need to learn to which you do have to an extent, learn how to departmental, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Box
you just got to you just got to separate it. Yeah, no. This is my job. This is what I do. But then when I go home, I have to be a person and be more than just
like I have to. And like and you learn to find that balance. I think that's one of the biggest contributors to teacher burnout is like in the early years, especially like you feel like you have to do all these things. And the work's always going to be there. Like I always sit down with my new teachers and I tell them like anything you are taking home, because you don't have a choice. The reality is we got to work from home, but at least take the pieces home that you enjoy. I hate grading papers. I will never bring papers home to grade. I will do it at work because I don't enjoy it. But like I love making an anchor chart. I'll do my anchor charts at home while I'm watching TV. Like you have to find like those pieces, that balance. But I always tell them like, listen, you're going to get burned out real quick. And yes, all the cutesy like teacher pay teacher centers that you have to cut 8 million pieces out, like all that stuff is great. But kids care more about you being present than like how cute the center was. When they look back, and I think back to like my time in education, like I don't look back on the curriculum. I look back on the relationships I have. I look back on the conversations we had in class about specific reading things or, those pieces. I look back and like reflect on the teachers that were there, to support me. Like those are the pieces that kids remember. They don't remember that, you spent 800 hours cutting out a center.
Exactly. They had a great learning objective.
Yeah.
This week. It's important, but like you said, the relationships, the joy you bring, because kids can easily tell when you're miserable or when you're loving what you do.
And there's ways to do those pieces where it's not taking you 800. Like there's ways to do it. They are important. They serve a purpose, but also being present serves that bigger purpose.
Period. I remember this last thing I'll say, then we'll move to episode 2. I remember, shout out to Sheila Nakarati. Amazing. I think we both know her.
Yep.
Amazing educator in the district and now administrator. She used to tell this story of she would bring kids' homework just for a car ride. Mm-hmm. She would put it in her car on a Friday, intending to grade it on the weekend. And then on Monday, it would still be in the car. Nothing had been done. I adopted that approach. I remember taking papers for a car ride just for the weekend, but just not doing it. Because to your point, Sarah, I just didn't want to. Grading didn't excite me. Of course, seeing the growth in students and seeing their artifacts did, but just the process of, my gosh, I have to do more.
Grading
to your point, it's about fun.
Test is not fun.
No, it's about finding balance. It's about thinking critically about what brings you joy. And if you're going to work on the weekends, which every teacher I've known has done. I know Sheila did, but I didn't mean to put Sheila on blast. Like that was a story to make her relatable. She's one of the best.
Every teacher here has a bag that goes on a field trip home every weekend.
Exactly. I just remember putting it in my trunk and I'm like, okay, I'm so ridiculous. So I love what you said there. And the last thing I want to say, what you mentioned about the library part of this episode with Janine and Greg. I was watching this thinking, y'all messy. Y'all are so messy. But we love you. And I believe this is going to work out. So that leads us into episode 2 entitled Ringworm. We certainly took a left turn on this one. And I want to start with the opening scene. One of my favorites in Abbott history. Tariq, Janine's ex, is now the PTA president. He's holding a meeting in Abbott's cafeteria / gym, and it ends with everyone, staff and attendees, doing a Will Smith inspired Wild Wild West line dance. Sarah, I've never been to a PTA meeting. I'm not even sure it exists in high school. Maybe it does, but I didn't. I didn't. Thank you for confirming. I just didn't see a lot of it at the high school level. I'm sure
they're not very exciting.
It's different. Yeah, to your point, I think this is what's so great about our conversation is you represent the elementary experience, whereas I have the high school experience. How did this cold open on episode 2 land with you?
I loved it. I love that they've brought Tariq back as this like key character as a PTA president. When I know he's dating the mom of a student, but like that's his only association. And I love like he clearly cares, but also is like so far from the mark. It's so interesting because I remember watching like the end of last season where Jacob comes to him and is like, hey, I need money for a field trip. And he's like, no, but like they had like a sushi bar. And he's like, well, yeah, we got to get people to come to PTA first and then we'll hit them up for money. And so like, it's such a cool storyline with Tariq just in general. I wish my PTA meetings, I love our PTA. They're wonderful. Our PTA meetings are not that exciting. I don't think
there's no line dancing.
No, I also love the storyline of Barbara not getting getting the actor and the actor names mixed up.
Will Ferrell.
I love Alpha. It's like
That's Jada's husband. Yeah. Hilarious.
And I love that that's just such a key piece. They're all so used to it. No one even argues with her. They're just like, okay.
So it's so
I really liked
it's one of the best cold opens.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I actually saw a tweet following this episode. I forget the user. I should shout them out. But they said, quote, they tweeted, having your boyfriend and your ex in the same space dancing at a PTA meeting. Yeah, Janine won. And multiple clap emojis. That's exactly the proper way to describe the opening of episode 2. Okay, so Sarah, this episode concerns one of Jacob's discoveries during class. And this goes to what you said as a teacher. You have to be hyper alert on what your kids are doing, how they're acting, what's going on with them. So Jacob is exemplifying this here. Great quality in him as a teacher. But he discovers that one of his students has ringworm. Jacob ends up sending the student home. The student returns the next day, I believe, with a note from his mom saying, and I quote, I'm not the 1 or the 2, so send him home at 3. Try Jesus, don't try me. I don't have a question for you about this other than like the decibel level. How hard did you laugh, chuckle? Or
I was like in tears. So one, you know, especially when they were talking about like this will spread. Once it spreads to the littles, it will spread. You can't not keep them from touching each other. You know, we've dealt with ringworm, hand, foot, mouth, lice. Like,
that was gonna be my question.
It was such like a true storyline. So like that part, and then the mom sending him back is also so true. Like I just remember back to like during COVID when like that was one of the big arguments was, well, parents will keep their kids home if they're sick. And it's like, no, like, and part of it is parents don't have a choice sometimes, you know, like you have to go to work. And if you don't have a daycare provider, like, and daycare is, you know, more than I pay in rent for a lot of my friends that have kids and stuff. Like you just sometimes just don't have a choice. If you can't afford to take a day or you're out of PTO, your kid's coming back to school. And so it was like those pieces of like, you know, we've all dealt with a parent, you know, unfortunately, that was like, no, they're coming back. But it was just the justified overreaction in a lot of ways, because that, especially with the littles, it spreads like wildfire. They touch everything. Everything ends up in their mouth. Like
it's inevitable.
Somebody's getting it. I hate to say it. And so it was so funny, but it was also just so genuinely true to what happens within, especially the elementary school campuses, of just like that panic. You're always going to have a Gregory Eddie, like Lysoling everything.
Yes. You know? I have it on my notes. Yeah.
We've got like Sheminti, who like, does she want ringworm? No, but she's just more concerned about her plans being ruined.
Exactly. You know, and then you have Ava, of course, is omnipresent.
Well, and then it was so funny watching Janine and Ava be on like the same page.
Yes.
But also so different. Like
yes, exactly.
And then Barbara,
Miss Howard. I love her.
You know, I love Barbara, and she was killing me, you know, growing up like in the evangelical church and things like that. Like that is that mentality of like, I'm good. I don't have to worry. You have to worry. I don't have to worry.
I'm set.
And so I was like, oh, this is very just reflective of I think episode 2, I loved episode 1, but episode 2, but I think it's that relational of, as we affectionately call it, the heebie-jeebies, which refers to any of those pieces.
Right. And then that's what I've been focused on thinking about season 4 is, you know, we're 50 episodes into the Abbott experience. What direction are they going to take these episodes where it can still feel fresh, comedic, but still have that element of grounded in realism of teaching? That's what they've done so well, is they've thread that needle so perfectly. This is a comedy. It's kind of that mockumentary style, but all the educators in my life who I know love this show, not just because of the laughs, but because of, oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me, or a similar situation at my school this semester.
Yeah.
And they're doing that here now with student health. Because ultimately, as teachers, Sarah, you know, I neglected to realize this until I got later into my career. It's not just about, can you deliver an effective lesson? You are literally responsible for the safety and well-being of 30 to 150 kids every day. That is number one. That is above how poppin' is your lesson objective.
Exactly.
You're there to take care of kids and make sure they're safe.
That's what I always tell my kids. Like, my first job is to keep you safe. You
Right.
know, unfortunately, that's typically in a conversation about lockdown, you know, but the reality is that's always my first job, is to keep you safe. If you're not safe, I didn't do my job well. You know, we have a lot of conversations around that, because it is so important. Like, it is important to keep you safe from getting ringworm and all those pieces, and how you talk to each other. And that is,
it's huge. It's huge. And the conversations look different at the elementary versus the high school level, but the tenor of it is really the same. It's about loving and taking care of them. Okay, Sarah. So Gregory, as you alluded to, is super extra. This is my final note about the ringworm episode that you really enjoyed, as did I.
It was so
Gregory is super extra and takes all the precautions and then some. However, the episode ends with him realizing that he's going a little too hard in the paint and neglecting Janine quite a bit. So he meets her so much to the point where he's not officially confirming that movie night, date night on Friday is still going to happen. But he sees the error of his ways. He meets Janine in the parking lot at the end of the episode, puts his arm around her. He's no longer worried about the disinfecting and all of that. And we can assume that they are on their way to movie night as our happy couple. What did you think of the rest of this episode, particularly that full circle moment of, okay, Gregory has self-awareness and now he is doing
I love the growth that Gregory has done over the seasons, because, you know, when we first met him, he was so rigid. And, like, you know, he still has these moments. He's always going to be Gregory. We don't want those pieces to change. You know, kind of like, I was laughing. I think it was episode 1 where they're talking about their plans, and she, like, Janine's like, oh, do you want to go to this place for Italian? And he's like, do they have buttered noodles? And she's like, I'm not going to go somewhere that doesn't have buttered noodles. Like, there's certain pieces of Gregory that's never going to change. But, you know, he came into season 1, he really didn't want to be a teacher, right? He wanted to fast track to being an admin.
He wanted to be a principal.
Yeah, he wasn't. And, like, he wanted to fast track, which is interesting. It's so common, right? Like, how many administrators have we talked to where it's like, oh yeah, I taught for like 2 years while I got my master's. And so it's really cool seeing him, like, embracing being in the classroom. But, like, just this growth of, like, season 1, Eddie would have gone home because that fear to him was more important than Janine. And not that Janine wasn't important to him, but, like, seeing the growth, and, like, part of that comes from the relationships that the cast has built, like, as teachers. They all trust each other, even when they're mad at each other.
Exactly.
So it's been such a cool arc with him.
And we love a healthy communication dynamic in a relationship as well. Where, to your point,
and we've had to work at it. Like,
they've had
that's
to work.
The thing. Yeah.
Come on now, speak on it. Yeah, they've had to work on it, and we've seen, for all these characters, but particularly with Gregory and Janine, we've seen them grow as individuals. But now in season 4, seeing them grow within the confines, if you will, of their relationship, and just how to make it work.
Janine, you know, season 1, season 2, I think she was still with Tariq, where she wasn't comfortable communicating with Tariq. So she let Tariq treat her the way she did, because she, one, didn't think she deserved better, but also didn't know how to communicate that she wasn't okay with those pieces, like him taking her car all day or whatever. And, like, you can really see that growth within her too, like, where they're both willing to communicate with each other. And, you know, part of that just comes from that, again, relationships. They spent so much time building that relationship that they have this trust now. And I think that's been a cool storyline to see build.
Well said. Sarah, that was it for me. I guess my final question for you. We know how Abbott does it. We're in, I think, this season for at least close to 20, if not more episodes. I hope so. Make it 30. Why not?
Make it 30.
Predictions, expectations, hopes, wishes for the rest of the season?
I have a feeling the gentrification episode is going to be kind of like our overarching seasonal, because that's how they started it. They kind of alluded a little bit to it in the second episode at the beginning when they were in the PTA meeting, where someone was like, well, what about this golf course? I don't want, and I feel like this was foreshadowing of, I don't want my kid to have to switch schools. And so I'm interested to see how, like, that plays out. I think that Janine and I think they're going to make it long term. I'm interested to see. I feel like they have to throw some sort of conflict in there just because, right? Because as much as we love them and want them to be genuinely happy, it doesn't make for good TV if it's all good all day.
Right. Is Manny going to pop back up? Is that the direction you're leading
I'm
us?
wondering.
You remember Manny?
I do, from the district.
Yeah, back when Janine was a district diva. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
District
Well,
diva.
and I'm interested to see how that plays out because like they clearly ended like on terms as friends within that group. Right. But even having HR come in where he was still clearly bitter that she had left, where he's
that was hilarious.
That was a really good line where he's like, I hope she doesn't leave you like she left the district. Yes. And it's such an interesting dynamic because it at least with HR, it's kind of painting this like the school versus the district versus like one of the nice things with Marana, like we work together, the district within the school. Like it's not this us versus them mentality. And so that was also like an interesting little that I feel like the district storyline isn't dead to some extent. How that's going to play out, I don't know. But I feel like kind of adding in those jabs of like, hope she doesn't leave you like she left the district. Like something has to be coming back somewhere.
Yeah. And we're going to keep an eye on it. We got to make sure we follow these storylines, Sarah. I also encourage our audience to follow you. So I first want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I want to know, how can our audience connect with you and support all that you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. Instagram's the easiest way. Dear Sarah Beth.
Period.
Yeah.
Y'all heard what you need to do.
I keep it easy,
Y'all heard. Check out Sarah. Follow her. Sarah, thank you again for joining us. This was a great conversation. I know you and I will talk Abbott off air throughout this season, I'm sure.
Yeah, we got an episode next week.
Yes, we do. I will be ready. Sarah, great seeing you. I'm wishing you an amazing semester. I hope all of you out there are doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow Sarah, and we'll see you next time.